about functions. Functions are ways of having to write a piece of code once instead of over and over and over again. So it's the equivalent of when your parent tells you to go get dressed. They're not having to tell you, go put your shirt on, go put your pants on, get your shoes and socks on. For each of those things, they're not telling you how you put a shirt on by putting your head through and then you pull your arms through. That's what a function essentially is it's a set of rules that can be called over and over again that the program knows how to define. So normally when I prepare for a class, I actually write out everything I'm going to do ahead of time before filming these because I want to make sure that there aren't any mistakes or pauses. In this case, that's not going to be the case because what I don't want to show you how to do the exact function that I'm going to do today. I want you to show you how to go about building your own functions, which means I need you to see how it is that I go about building a function and the pieces of thought that go into it. So the first thing to look at is I have my basic file. Very rarely do I write this from scratch. All I did was I copied it from test.py and moved it over to something I'm calling Minecraft stuff, not to be confused with the Minecraft stuff that we got our turtle from. And I'll put various functions in here and grow it over time. So what I want to do, I have to have my imports. I'm always going to be importing these things. I import my keys so that I don't have to have public information in a shared file or private information in a public file. I'm connecting to the server. I'm getting my ID and I'm getting my position. Now, eventually I'm going to clean up this whole my ID and my position and create a class out of that. But that's a little bit much for today, so we'll hold off on that. But what I am going to do as a temporary tool is instead of getting my position once at the beginning of when I run the file, I actually want to be able to have that be a callable function. So I can say as part of another function, hey, what's my position? And just get back my position. Now technically that right here is what this is, but this is a little bit cumbersome to type out every single time. So I'm going to simplify that by just having a definition, which is a function, my position, that's here to be called. And I'll go ahead and have an ID. Nah, I'm not going to do that. Okay. So for a function, you start it with def. This is the name of the function, and then any variables you want to pass into the function so that it can do something more flexible, you would put between these two parentheses. I thought about putting my ID as a variable, but I want to keep this very simple. And so I have definition, my position, and within that I am going to put this phrase right here. And I'm just going to say return and put that in there. And what that means is when I call the function my position, it returns this value right here. So it's a very, very simple function. It just makes it a little bit easier than typing that whole thing out each time. So now I'm going to go down here in my interpreter. I'm going to import MC stuff. And remember, I'm running this interpreter from the file that's in. .py, I think I need. No, did I save this or am I spelling it wrong? Let me exit this, see where I am. Whoops. Let me exit this. I'm in MindPy, that's where MC stuff is. Let me run Python 3 again. let me import MC stuff dot py. Huh. Oh, I didn't make it executable, I bet. No, I did make it executable. Let me go look. So ls-l. I can see in here I have MC stuff. Oh, I've got it named MC stuff and there's no py on the end. That's the problem. Okay, so I want to go up here and change my file name. Go over here and change my file name. Rename. I need to have that .py on the end for it to know what it is. Okay. Now let's try this. It is not, by the way, executable, but I don't think that will matter. So we're going to try it. Python 3, import MC stuff. Perfect. Okay. So now I want to run my pose, but I need to run MC stuff dot my pose, and we got my position. Okay. So again, super simple, but that way we don't have to keep calling this giant thing every single time, and we can just call a simple my position definition. So what I want to do today for real is I want to figure out how to make a rectangular prism. That is to say, I want to create something that's like a cube, only cubes have all equal sides. And this one, I want to be able to pass in a different X, Y, and Z lengths into it. So different height, width, and length. So I'm going to start out by calling def rectangular prism, and I need to pass some variables into it. So I'm going to start simple, and then we'll add some more information in here as time goes on. So I'll start with X diff, Y diff, and Z diff. I'm sticking with X, Y, and Z instead of length, width, and height so that we can match what we would expect in the Minecraft world. And I want to set all of these to have a default value of 1. So we can still pass in different information, but that way if someone forgets to set it in, it's not going to be that big of a deal because we'll still have a 1 there. I need a colon on the end, and then my interpreter or my editor here automatically indents for me, which is really nice. So now the first thing I'm going to do is worry about how to make a square. So, or how to make a rectangle, sorry. So that's going to be my X and my Z diffs. I also want to have it be in relation to where I am standing, which is why we bothered to create this my position variable. I'm also going to be placing blocks, and I need to remember how to place blocks. So I'm going to go over here to the API, and I set a block with an X, Y, and Z. So I will go back over. The very first thing I'm going to do is just remember how to set a block. I just tab completed that. And I'm going to use for the X, Y, and Z right now my position. And that's it. Okay, we're going to try this and see how it works. So down over here, I'm going to re-import MC stuff, and I'm going to do a rectangular prism. Okay. And I'm not going to pass anything over because I'm not using anything yet. Oh, let's see. I thought I saved it. I might actually have to reload Python each time, which is unfortunate. Oops. I didn't import MC stuff. Okay. So it tells me something's wrong. It tells me that I didn't call the block correctly. I called it with my position, and it wants it to be a real number, not a function. And that's because I used the old my position, not the function my position. And I forgot to put in my parentheses there to call the function. So let's try that again. Save up here. We'll try just re-importing it. No, we need to exit. That's unfortunate. I was really hoping we'd be able to keep the interpreter open. So I need to import it, and then I need to run it. There we go. I should have gotten a brick where or a block where I was, but I don't think I did. I did not. So now we need to figure out why that was. And so I'm going to do it the way I generally do things like this, and go over and look at my classroom code that we put in here and see why it's not working. So down here, I got my position, and then I set blocks, and I know I set a block with my position right here, and it worked. Oops, I gotta stop doing that. So I have MC, view assignment, view instructions, MC dot set block, and I use my position just like that. So we'll go over here, and maybe it didn't like that there wasn't a default thing, but I thought before we had done that. So I just copied the exact same thing that I knew was working before. So it starts over with my ID. It doesn't use the my position bit right here, and it puts the block bool, and it puts in 5. I'm going to exit, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run rectangular prism over here. That way I can just run this in my command line after I make it executable. So chmod a plus x mc stuff makes it executable, and now I can do mc stuff, and I should get a block where I am, but I am not. I just did a little bit of debugging, and I'll show you what I did with that. I went into my Python editor, and I started copying out some of the stuff from in my file. So I copied the basics that get me connected, pasted those in, and then I went ahead and copied just the mc.set block and pasted that in to see if it would set a block, and it did. And so I thought, well, maybe some things are going on weird with the function. So I copied out the function here into the Python interpreter, and I just called it, I just copied it there. I haven't actually called it. Now I'm going to call it with nothing in it, and as you can see, it created a block there for me. I don't know what the issue is yet, because I decided to come back and do the rest of the debugging with you guys. I suspect I might not have actually saved my file. So I'm going to exit the interpreter, I'm going to run my file, and we're going to see if I get another block, and I do. So that was just a silly mistake on my part, not saving a file. Now I'm going to come back over here, and I want to call my position in here, remember, because that was the whole point, was to have a simpler way of doing things. There. I'm going to save it. I'm going to change my block color because I'm starting to get a little crowded here. Oops. Okay, now I'm going to save that for sure, and I'm going to run it again. And we see with the way I got shoved over that it worked. So I have a new block in there. So I suspect that it was a problem with saving. Again, that's why I'm running this without going through everything first, is because I need you guys to recognize the sorts of silly little troubleshooting that need to happen when you're doing this. So we'll keep the block and the block ID. Now, I need to think to myself how you go about building a square, a square or a rectangle out of blocks. And so if I start with my position and I want to build a rectangle that goes 6 or x diff, okay, in the x position, then I would come over here and I would say for I in range 0 to x diff. Okay, and I don't want 0 to x diff, I want 0 to x diff minus 1, because we're starting by adding 0, and that's our first block. If we end by adding x diff, that will be our x diff plus 1 block. So if we, for instance, if I wanted my square to have sides of length, or my rectangle, sorry, to have sides of length 5, then I would go from 0 to 4, because I would count out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 on my fingers, which you can't see, and see that that's actually 5 blocks. So for I in range 0 to x diff minus 1, I'm going to set my block. First I'm going to create my block position. Actually, first I'm going to say x equals my position dot x plus I. What that means here is I'm going to take my current x position, and then I'm going to add I each time to place a block. So I'm placing a block where I am, 1 further from where I am, 2 further from where I am, and so forth. Okay? And then I'm going to place my block. And we're going to do it a little bit differently this time. And instead of passing it a complete x, y, z vector, I'm going to pass it individual x, y's, and z's. So I have mc.setBlock, and instead of putting my position in here, I'm going to do x, and then I'm going to do my position dot y and my position, and I should make that be a function, dot z. And I'm eventually going to change these x, y, these y's and z's as well, okay? So all I'm trying to do is get the first line down for my block, okay? So I'm doing x, my position dot y, and my position dot z. And there's going to be a problem with this, and it's going to be kind of silly, but we're going to watch it and see what happens. So I made sure to save that. I'm going to go down here and I'm going to run it. And nothing happened. Oh, that's because I didn't actually call it with my new xdiff. Okay, so I need to do this as xdiff equals 6 is what we'll do. There we go. Now I'm going to save it and I'm going to run it. So do you see the silly thing that's happening here? It didn't actually make a straight line. And that's because I called my position each time I placed the block. And the problem with that is the blocks move me around. So I need to set my position once as soon as this is called. Okay, and I'm just going to call it start. Okay, so it's going to be the bottom corner of the block. And that's going to be my position. And that way I don't get shoved around as I'm doing things and mess everything up. So every place that I called my position, I'm going to place start instead. Okay. So now we're going to go over here, destroy our blocks. That's all of them. Save this, and then I'm going to run it. And now I have a nice straight line that should be 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, that's only 5 blocks long. Oh, I think that for X in range here, it actually stops when it gets to xdiff rather than after completing this second item in the range. So we did want to just leave that being xdiff there. So let's save that, run it again. And now I have something that is 6 blocks long. Okay, so now let me double check. Yes. So now this video is already getting a little bit long. I think I'm going to actually change this to creating a rectangle. And next time I'll create the rectangular prism. So to create a rectangle, we need to just pass X and Z over. Okay. So I've created one of the sides in my square, or my rectangle, I'm sorry. I need to create 3 more sides. And I don't want to have them filled in, so it's not as simple as just going through and moving the Y by 1 and then moving it by 1, or the Z by 1 over and over again for all of the Z's. So I'll show you how we would do that if we want a filled in square. I created this as the first start of the square, and what I would do is I would actually create a whole line of blocks for each of these rows. So for while I was equal to 1, I wouldn't just create this first block, I'd also create my Z depth of field blocks as well. So I'll show you what that looks like. And so instead of setting the block for X and start.Y, I'm actually going to say that that's what my X is going to be for the row, but then I need to find my Y's for the row. So I'm going to say for J in range 0 to Z diff. I'm sorry, I keep getting Y and Z confused because normally I would think of this world as being X and Y, and then Z is what gives it volume. So for the J between 0 and where we want our width of our square to be, our Z difference, okay, we're going to set our Y position. or sorry, again, our Z position equals start dot Z plus J. And now I'm going to set my block having both X and Z set. I'm going to save this, or I'm going to put in a Z diff of 3. And now I'm going to come over here, destroy my blocks so I can see what progress I've made. Okay, and I'm going to go back to my screen over here, my terminal over here, and I'm going to run this. Oh, it tells me, oh, so what it's saying is for J in that range, something's missing right here. I have invalid syntax. It means I made basically a spelling mistake. And I do this all the time. I need to put a colon there. That's what it lets the interpreter know that the for statement has really started. So I need to save that. I need to run it again. Oh, it says the name rectangular prism is not defined. That's because I changed the name of our function. So I save that. And this is just what writing code for me in particular is like. Okay, there we go. Now I have a huge block that is 3 by 6. And I actually think I'm going to leave it like this. And the reason is I might want to have a solid side. I might want this to be where it is. And I can take this function that's a rectangle, and I can come over here and I can make another definition, another function that is an hollow or an empty rectangle. I can put X diff and Z diff. And I realize I can't do this just yet. And my goal here is going to be that I can take the outer rectangle, and then I can do everything for that, and then I can empty it out by making the rectangle too smaller on each side and filling it with air. But I can't do that just yet because I haven't passed over two important things. I haven't passed over what I would like my rectangle to be made out of, and I haven't passed over an optional other starting position. So I guess that will be something for another time, but that's something that we could start doing, is we can use our filled in rectangle to make hollow rectangles. Okay, so I have my X diff, my Z diff. I'm going to correct what I just said, and that is that I don't have my data and my block being sent over. For right now, I'm just going to send my block type over, and I'm going to call it, I have to name it block type because it's going to get confused with the block that we imported. I'm going to have my block type be block.dirt by default. I'm going to get rid of this and replace it with block type. So by default, we'll make rectangles out of dirt. I lost a parentheses there. There we go. And so if I come down here and I don't do anything with my rectangle, I save this and I run it, I now have a block filled with dirt. Now if I pass block type equals block dot wool, oops, or wooden slab, we'll try that, and I come over here and I run it, I have a rectangle made out of a wooden slab. Now there's one more thing I can do is I can pass over data, and I'm going to pass over, I need to go look at my API over here and see what the default data is, so that if a block type doesn't have data, I am not sending over something impossible. So if I scroll down, we get all of these. And the data or subtype of a block. So I think that 0 will be my default block, although I see that Torch doesn't have a 0, so that might break things. We're gonna see. I'm gonna double check up here and see if it tells me. No, it just tells me that data can be in there. So I'm actually going to do this a little bit differently, and I'm going to pass over null for data. And I'm going to call this in 2 different ways. I'm going to say if data, then I'll call this and I'll pass data, and else, and I'll pass this without the data. There. Get rid of that. Okay. Now I'll come down here and I'll change this to wool again. And then I'll say data equals 6. Call this one more time. Oh, it's telling me I've got an error. Null is not defined. Let's see. Do I need strings around null? I don't think so. Is it NU without all lowercase? Let's try that. Null is not defined. Try one more. That null is not defined. So I come over here and I do Python null. Null is supposed to mean that it doesn't have any value. None is the Python keyword, it says. Okay. And I should have known that none of these were right, because when they're correct, they turn a nice color. For me, it's this dark blue, and it says that it recognizes that that's a keyword. Okay. So now I'm running it, and we've got our gray, it looks like, wool as part of a block. Now, I think this video is by far long enough talking about how to create some things. I will come back and film a second one that first goes into how to get a position, and then we'll hollow out our rectangle. And then we'll use those 2 pieces of information to create our rectangular prism. So this is enough for tonight, or for right now, but look for another video shortly, because I will film it fairly quickly. That is a second part.